Ancestors. Ancestors. How to use ancestors in a sentence. Hi everyone. I'm Heslam from www.translatean.com. If you have been looking for ancestors and sentence examples with audio pronunciation, then you are right here. So let's get started. Are we being good ancestors? His ancestors would be proud. Where are your ancestors from? My ancestors are from Germany. We should worship our ancestors. We should respect our ancestors. Tom's ancestors came from Africa. That tribe worships its ancestors. My name links me with my ancestors. His ancestors went there from Ireland. The learned man worships his ancestors. I can trace my ancestors back 200 years. Know the history of the great ancestors. The wisdom of our ancestors is immortal. Our ancestors knew how to read the stars. The Indians' ancestors arrived from Asia. Your ancestors are buried at this church. Our family has some distinguished ancestors. My ancestors hoped to find political asylum. My ancestors were the pioneers of this land. Humans and their ancestors originated in Africa. The wisdom of our ancestors is in the simile. Humans and their ancestors originated in Africa. The industrious merchant worships his ancestors. We visit the tombs of our ancestors on this day. Our ancestors came to this country 150 years ago. Our ancestors came here over 100 years ago. Your crimes have desecrated your ancestors' graves. Our ancestors arrived in this country 150 years ago. Their clothes are quite like those of our ancestors. Our ancestors have invented, we can at least innovate. Tom says he can trace his ancestors back about 300 years. His French ancestors spelled the family name Sabresols. They are sitting around the graves of their dead ancestors. His French ancestors spelled the family name Sabresols. His ancestors on his mother's side were of Knickerbocker descent. His ancestors on his mother's side were of Knickerbocker descent. Our ancestors worked hard and enabled us to be where we are today. Our ancestors worked hard and enabled us to be where we are today. It's the land of my ancestors that you are trampling with your feet. I keep the light and love from my ancestors and let go of the rest. Our ancestors developed massive jaws as a result of constant combat. I want you to remember, my brothers, what happened to our ancestors. Separate altars are used to honor ancestors in the sacred directions. It's the land of my ancestors that you're regretting on with your feet. Separate altars are used to honor ancestors in the sacred directions. We wouldn't be where we are today without the hard work of our ancestors. Our ancestors built temples for their gods. We built department stores. We wouldn't be where we are today without the hard work of our ancestors. I don't know who my ancestors are. Our papers got lost during the flood. Forbes worked to win back some of the alienated possessions of his ancestors. Forbes worked to win back some of the alienated possessions of his ancestors. Our ancestors sought knowledge, but we, their descendants, glorify ignorance. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. Bako's grandmother Naana, a blind seer, stands in living contact with the ancestors. His father's ancestors were from St. Katharina along the Bavarian-Austrian border. Bako's grandmother Naana, a blind seer, stands in living contact with the ancestors. His father's ancestors were from St. Katharina along the Bavarian-Austrian border. Several of his ancestors had previously represented Suffolk in the House of Commons. Several of his ancestors had previously represented Suffolk in the House of Commons. Lita, do you consider that Native Americans are your ancestors? Yes, of course I do. Their protector Kami is determined by their ancestors' relationship to the Kami. Their protector Kami is determined by their ancestors' relationship to the Kami. The most beautiful heritage my ancestors had left me is an impeccable name, respected by all. The ancestors of Native Americans went to the continent from Asia by way of the Bering Strait. She was very fond of walking through the Great Hall, where hung the portraits of her ancestors. The tribe worships its ancestors and speaks its own language, and speaks an unfamiliar language. The reason our hair is brown is that it enabled our monkey ancestors to hide amongst the coconuts. He honestly expected her to believe that she could make a bad offering and her ancestors wouldn't mind. There's a rumor in my mother's village that we have Japanese ancestors. I don't know what to make of it. Our world changes as fast as never before. Every week we get further from the plain living of our ancestors. In fact, a group of their ancestors peopled a continent on the planet Earth about 250,000 of your Earth years ago. Our ancestors used animals to name the years of people's births as their lives were closely connected to these animals. And the answer is by telling them what they know in their heart, which is they or their ancestors did not come here for a handout. The price we have paid for expecting to be so much more than our ancestors is a perpetual anxiety that we are far from being all we might be. There are things in life that science will never be able to see. We have to rely on what has been passed from our ancestors, generation to generation. My ancestors offer me bliss, love, and light. I gratefully receive that which is for my highest good and release the rest back into the pure, white light. Had the elephant and the giraffe not yet common ancestors, how might one possibly have observed that they had an exactly equal number of vertebrae in their necks? You are blessed, O Lord our God and God of our ancestors, God of Abraham, God of Isaac and God of Jacob, God of Sarah, God of Rebekah, God of Rachel and God of Leah. We all grow up with the weight of history on us. Our ancestors dwell in the attics of our brains as they do in the spiraling chains of knowledge hidden in every cell of our bodies. Our descendants will sooner or later reach, as a race, the condition of cosmic consciousness, just as, long ago, our ancestors passed from simple consciousness into self-consciousness. And the thing I most dearly want to do is make sure that my children and my grandchildren grow up in a country where they will be free human beings instead of the slaves my ancestors were. Of the ancestors. Perhaps our ancestors. When our own ancestors. Small-brained ancestors. Ancestors' powers, huh? That became the ancestors. Potential human ancestors. And the ancestors and so on. Of our most ancient ancestors. As our ancient ancestors were. My ancestors were swordsmiths. As it was lived by our ancestors. From the moment that our ancestors. You have to respect your ancestors. Ancestors, I ask for your guidance. The spirit of our ancestors says. To where our ancestors first settled. That's where my ancestors are buried. Thank you for watching. Here are a couple of videos that I suggest you watch next. Before you move on to next video, if you find this video helpful, please make sure that you are subscribed to my channel. Just click the link in the description below and enable all notifications. You will be notified whenever I upload my next video. Thank you so much. See you soon.